She served me papers for my illegal shed. The sky was about to serve her a death warrant. The final bolt clicked into place with a satisfying thud that echoed inside the small, reinforced space. Alex Keller wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of a calloused hand, the scent of steel, concrete, and damp earth filling his lungs. It wasn't pretty. The exterior was a utilitarian gray, a low-profile metal structure that hugged the ground at the far corner of his property, partially obscured by a line of young cypress trees he'd planted the day they moved in. To the casual observer, it was just a shed. An unusually robust, windowless, and frankly ugly shed that stuck out like a sore thumb in the meticulously curated landscape of Maple Creek Estates. But to Alex, it was peace of mind. It was a fortress. It was the solemn promise he'd made to himself as a 10-year-old boy, huddled under a flimsy staircase while the world outside was ripped to shreds by a monster with a voice like a freight train. He ran his hand along the cool, smooth steel of the interior wall. 6-inch thick, rebar-enforced concrete clad in quarter-inch plate steel, anchored 10 feet deep into the bedrock. It had cost him nearly everything they had in savings, a secret expenditure he'd justified to his wife, Sarah, as a long-term property improvement. She knew his history, the lingering shadow of the F4 tornado that had carved its way through his childhood town, and she hadn't fought him on it. She just worried. She worried about the money, about what the neighbors would think, and most of all, she worried that the thing he was building to keep his demons at bay was just giving them a new home in their backyard. Stepping out of the cool dimness and back into the oppressive humidity of a late August afternoon, Alex blinked against the sunlight. Maple Creek was a symphony of oppressive perfection. Every lawn was a carpet of impossible green, every mailbox stood at a uniform height, and every decorative shrub was pruned into submission. It was the kind of neighborhood that had a 5-page addendum in the HOA bylaws dedicated solely to acceptable shades of beige for exterior paint. And his shed, his gray steel bunker, was a declaration of war against that beige-tinted tranquility. He knew it was coming. He'd seen the twitching curtains, the neighbors who suddenly found their driveways fascinating whenever he was outside. But he hadn't expected it to arrive in a golf cart, driven by the commander-in-chief of the Maple Creek Homeowners Association herself, Carol Donaldson. She rolled onto his driveway with the silent, electric hum of an apex predator closing in on its prey. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a helmet of blonde hair that looked like it could withstand a hurricane better than most houses, and eyes that held the cold, judgmental glint of a bank auditor. She wore a pastel pink polo shirt, with the Maple Creek logo embroidered on the breast, a clipboard resting on the passenger seat like a scepter. "Alexander," she began, her voice crisp and devoid of warmth. She didn't get out of the cart. It was a power move, forcing him to approach her like a vassal to his queen. "It's Alex," he said, walking over, his hands instinctively wiping grease from his work jeans. "Hi, Carol. Something I can help you with?" Her eyes flicked past him, locking onto the shed. A faint, almost imperceptible sneer tightened her lips. "I see you've completed your project." "Just finished," Alex said, trying to keep his tone neutral. "Just a storage shed. For the lawnmower, kids' bikes. You know." "I see," she said, though her expression made it clear she didn't believe a word. She picked up her clipboard. "And did you submit an architectural change request form to the committee before commencing construction on this shed?" The question hung in the air, a guillotine waiting to drop. They both knew the answer. "I didn't think I needed to," Alex lied, a flush of heat creeping up his neck. "It's an outbuilding under 200 square feet. Most municipal codes don't require—" "We are not the municipality, Alexander," she cut him off, her voice dropping a degree. "We are Maple Creek Estates. Our covenants and restrictions supersede any local ordinance on matters of aesthetic harmony. Section 4, Article B, subsection 12, all outbuildings, sheds, gazebos, or other detached structures must be pre-approved by the Architectural Review Committee. Materials must be congruent with the primary dwelling, and the color palette must be selected from the approved list." She looked from her clipboard to his gray metal box, and then back. I don't recall industrial steel gray being on the list, do you? Alex felt a familiar surge of adrenaline, the fight-or-flight instinct that had kept him alive 20 years ago. He chose fight. Carol, it's a shed. It's behind the tree line. You can barely see it from the street. Oh, we can see it, she assured him, a thin smile playing on her lips. Mr. Henderson from 2 doors down was the first to report it. He was concerned it was impacting his property value. A legitimate concern, I might add. It looks like a shipping container. It's an eyesore, and it's a clear violation. It's for safety, Alex said, the words slipping out before he could stop them. It's reinforced. For storms, Carol actually laughed, a short, sharp, dismissive bark. Storms! Alexander, this is Maple Creek, not some trailer park in the middle of nowhere. We have standards. We have property values to maintain. We don't build hideous metal bunkers in our backyards because we're afraid of a little thunder. The condescension in her voice was a lit match on his frayed nerves. A little thunder didn't kill my entire family, Carol. The words hit her with physical force. Her smile vanished, her posture stiffened. For a moment, a flicker of something, shock, maybe even pity, crossed her face. But it was gone as quickly as it came, replaced by a renewed, hardened resolve. She saw his trauma not as a reason, but as a weakness to be exploited, an emotional excuse for breaking her sacred rules. While your personal history is unfortunate, she said, her voice now dripping with acid sweetness, it does not grant you an exemption from the binding legal agreement you signed when you purchased this house. The bylaws are for everyone. They ensure the harmony and value of our community. A community you are currently jeopardizing with that thing. She revved the golf cart's electric motor, a low whine in the otherwise silent afternoon. This is your only verbal warning. You have 48 hours to provide the committee with a detailed plan for the structure's immediate removal. If we do not receive that plan, our attorney will be in contact. We will fine you daily for the violation, and if necessary, we will place a lien on your property and pursue legal action to force its demolition at your expense. Am I clear? Alex stood there, his fists clenched at his sides, his heart hammering against his ribs. He watched her steer the golf cart in a perfect, precise arc and glide away down the immaculate street, a suburban despot on her silent throne. He was shaking, not with fear, but with a white-hot rage that threatened to consume him. He stormed back inside the house, the screen door slamming shut behind him. Sarah was at the kitchen island sorting through mail. She looked up, her face etched with concern. I saw her. What did she want? The shed, Alex growled, pacing the length of the kitchen. She called it an eyesore. A violation? She gave us 48 hours to tear it down or she's getting lawyers involved. Sarah's face went pale. She dropped the mail on the counter. Alex, no. I told you this would happen. You can't just build something like that in a neighborhood like this without asking. These people are different. Different? They're tyrants in tennis skirts, he shot back, his voice louder than he intended. Their 5-year-old daughter, Lily, looked up from her coloring book in the living room, her eyes wide. Alex instantly lowered his voice, running a hand through his hair in frustration. I'm sorry. She belittled it, Sarah. She belittled me. She laughed when I said it was for storms. Did you tell her why? About your family? Sarah asked softly. I did, he said, his voice cracking slightly. She didn't care. She said my unfortunate history doesn't give me an exemption. Sarah wrapped her arms around herself, a protective gesture. So what do? We can't afford a lawyer to fight the HOA, not after this. She gestured vaguely towards the backyard. Can't you just, put some siding on it? Paint it beige? It's 1/4-inch steel plate, Sarah. You don't just nail vinyl siding to it. That's the whole point! It's supposed to be strong. He felt cornered, trapped between the unyielding steel of his shelter and the unyielding rules of the HOA. He had built this one thing to feel safe, and now it was the source of a new threat, one that could cost them their home. The next 47 hours were a tense, silent hell. Alex researched HOA law, growing more and more despondent. The documents he'd signed were ironclad. Carol had him, and she knew it. Sarah tried to be supportive, but he could see the "I told you so" simmering just behind her worried eyes. He didn't submit a demolition plan. He couldn't. It felt like tearing down a memorial. It felt like admitting his promise to protect his new family was meaningless. On the morning of the third day, the deadline having passed at 2 p.m. the previous afternoon, Alex was staring out the kitchen window at his defiant gray monument when he saw the mail carrier pull up. A few minutes later, the clank of the mailbox lid closing echoed down the street. Sarah went to get it. He watched her walk back, her steps slowing as she approached the door. She wasn't carrying a handful of bills and flyers. She was holding The heavy stock paper felt cold and unnervingly official in Alex's hand. He slit the envelope open with a kitchen knife, the sound unnaturally loud in the silent room. Sarah stood beside him, her arms wrapped so tightly around herself it looked like she was physically trying to hold her world together. He unfolded the single sheet of paper inside. It wasn't a letter. It was a weapon crafted from clauses and subclauses, and aimed directly at the heart of their life. Official notice of covenant violation and demand for removal. The heading was in a bold, severe font that screamed authority. Below it, the legalese flowed in dense, intimidating paragraphs. It cited with damning precision Section 4, Article B, Subsection 12 of the Maple Creek Covenant's Conditions and Restrictions. It described his shelter as an unapproved, non-conforming structure composed of industrial-grade materials wholly incongruent with the established aesthetic character of the community. It went on. Pursuant to Article F, a daily fine of $200, 200 dakwars, was now being levied against their property, retroactive to the expiration of the 48-hour verbal warning. They already owed $600. The final paragraph was the kill shot. Should the non-conforming structure not be completely dismantled and removed from the premises within 10 calendar days of the date of this notice, the association will have no alternative but to file for a court order to compel its removal. All associated legal fees, demolition costs, and accrued fines will be the sole responsibility of the homeowner and will be secured through a lien placed upon the property. Alex read the last line aloud, his voice a hoarse whisper. It's secured through a lien placed upon the property. Sarah made a small, choked sound. A lien? Alex, that means they could force a sale. They could take our house. They won't get that far, Alex said, the words tasting like ash in his mouth. He was trying to sound confident, but the paper in his hand felt like a death certificate for their future. How? Sarah's voice rose, cracking with panic. How will we stop them? We don't have $20,000 for a lawyer, let alone whatever it would cost to fight these people. And we're being fined $200 a day? That's our grocery budget for a week. Every single day. She snatched the letter from his hand, her eyes scanning the page as if hoping to find a loophole, a mistake. This is insane. Over a shed. You have to tear it down, Alex. Now. Today. We can call someone. Get a crew out here. No, Alex said, the word coming out as hard as the steel in his backyard. I am not tearing it down. Why are you being so stubborn? She cried, her fear finally boiling over into anger. Listen to yourself. You are willing to risk our home, our daughter's home, because of something that happened 20 years ago. I know it was horrible, I know it hurt you, but you can't let it destroy us now. It's not destroying us, it's protecting us. He shot back, his own control fraying. That something that happened 20 years ago is the reason I can't sleep when there's a thunderstorm. It's the reason I watch the weather report like a hawk from March to June. That shed is the only thing that makes this place feel safe. Don't you get it? I built it for you, for Lily, so I'd know there's one place on earth I could keep you both safe. We're not safe if we're homeless, she yelled, tears streaming down her face now. What's Lily going to think when we have to pack up her room because Daddy couldn't let go of his stupid shed? Carol has all the power here, Alex, all of it. And you just handed her the gun to shoot us with. The argument raged, a furious, desperate storm contained within the four walls of their perfect suburban house. It was full of jagged edges and painful truths, their shared anxieties weaponized against each other. It ended, as most of their fights did, in a strained, wounded silence. Sarah retreated upstairs, the sound of their bedroom door clicking shut like a judge's gavel. Alex was left alone in the kitchen, the lawyer's letter on the counter, a ticking time bomb. He felt a profound sense of isolation. He had built a fortress to protect his family, only to find himself under siege, with the enemy's cannons aimed at his front door and a mutiny brewing within the walls. He couldn't give up. Not on this. Giving up would mean letting the fear win. The same helpless, paralyzing fear he'd felt as a boy. There had to be another way. Carol was just one person. The HOA was a board made up of their neighbors. They were people. They had kids, fears, lives. Maybe they just didn't understand. If he could explain, if he could just make them see, an idea born of desperation took root. He couldn't fight her legally, but maybe he could fight her politically. He would go door to door. He would talk to his neighbors, explain the situation, and show them he wasn't some renegade trying to destroy property values, but a father trying to protect his family. He would start a petition, get enough signatures to force the board to reconsider. He started next door. The house belonged to the Hendersons. Mr. Henderson was the one Carol had mentioned. He was a retiree, a quiet man who spent most of his days meticulously tending to his rose bushes. Alex's heart hammered as he rang the doorbell. The door opened and Mr. Henderson peered out, his eyes magnified by thick glasses. "Alex," he said, his voice a little shaky. "Everything all right?" "I hope so, George," Alex began, trying to keep his voice steady. "Listen, I need to talk to you about something. Carol Donaldson came by about my new shed." George Henderson's face fell. He glanced nervously back into his house before stepping out onto the porch and pulling the door partially closed. "Ah, yes, about that," he mumbled, refusing to meet Alex's eyes. I may have mentioned it to her. I wasn't trying to cause trouble, son. It's very gray." "I know, George, and I'm sorry if it's an eyesore," Alex said, deciding to press on. "But there's a reason for it. It's not just a shed. It's a storm shelter." He quickly recounted the story of his childhood, the tornado, the loss of his family. He didn't embellish. He didn't have to. The raw, unvarnished truth was horrifying enough. As he spoke, he watched the old man's expression change from nervous guilt to a deep, sorrowful empathy. "My God, son," George whispered when he was finished. "I had no idea. My wife's cousin, they lived in Joplin back in 2011. They lost everything. Found their car 3 blocks away." He finally looked at the gray structure in Alex's yard, his eyes seeing it for the first time, not as a violation, but as a sanctuary. "That woman," he said, his voice laced with a newfound disdain. "She twists everything. Always has." "They've sent a lawyer's letter," Alex said, pressing his advantage. "They're threatening to put a lien on our house. I'm trying to get a few neighbors to sign something just to ask the board to grant an exception." George hesitated, wringing his hands. "I'll sign it," he said finally, his voice firm. "It's the right thing to do. But be careful, Alex. Crossing Carol. She has a long memory." Buoyed by his first victory, Alex moved on. His optimism was short-lived. 3 houses down, a woman in yoga pants who was on the HOA's social committee answered the door. Before he could even finish his first sentence, she cut him off. "Oh, you're the one with the bunker," she said, her smile tight and condescending. "Carol sent an email blast about it this morning. Preserving our community's visual integrity. Look, I'm sorry about your situation, but we all have to follow the rules. That's why we moved here. It's what keeps this place nice. If you get an exception, then what's next? Someone wants to paint their house purple? Someone wants to park a boat in their driveway? It's a slippery slope." She took the petition he offered, glanced at George Henderson's lonely signature, and handed it back with a dismissive shrug. "Sorry, I can't help you. It was the same at the next house and the one after that. Fear. It was palpable." One man, while washing his car, listened intently and nodded with sympathy. "She's out of control, man," he muttered, looking over his shoulder. "But my wife is up for review for the garden club next month, and Carol's the president. I can't. I'm sorry." After 2 hours, Alex had only one signature, George Henderson's. Defeated, he trudged back home, the useless petition crumpled in his hand. The manicured lawns and identical houses no longer looked perfect. They looked like cages, populated by people too scared to rattle the bars. As he turned onto his street, he saw it. Parked in his driveway, gleaming in the afternoon sun, was Carol Donaldson's golf cart. A cold dread washed over him. worse than anything the lawyer's letter had made him feel. She was here. Why was she here? He broke into a run, his heart pounding in his ears. He imagined a confrontation on the lawn, another volley of threats. But as he got closer, he saw the front door was closed. She was inside. He burst through the door, his mind racing with a dozen terrible scenarios. The sight that greeted him stopped him dead in his tracks. Carol was sitting in his living room. She was in his favorite armchair, a teacup and saucer resting delicately in her lap. Opposite her on the sofa sat Sarah. There was another teacup on the coffee table in front of her. The room was silent, the air thick with an unspoken tension that was suffocating. Sarah's face was pale, her expression strained and completely unreadable. Carol turned her head slowly as Alex entered, her movements deliberate and serpentine. A triumphant, predatory smile spread across her face. Alexander. "I'm so glad you're here," she said, her voice smooth as venom. "Your wife and I were just having a very productive conversation about your—" The air in the living room was so thick with tension, Alex felt like he was breathing water. His gaze locked on Carol, who met his fury with a look of serene, condescending pity. Then he looked at Sarah. She wouldn't meet his eyes, staring instead at the untouched teacup on the coffee table as if it held the answers to the universe. The betrayal was a physical ache in his chest. "Get out of my house," Alex said, his voice dangerously low. Carol raised a perfectly plucked eyebrow. She took a slow, deliberate sip of her tea before placing the cup back on its saucer with a faint, mocking clink. "Now, Alexander, there's no need for hysterics. Your wife and I were simply having a civil conversation, something you seem to be incapable of. We were discussing the offer the association is prepared to make," Sarah said, her voice small and strained. "Out of respect for your situation, offer?" Alex laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "What kind of offer? To let us keep our home if I personally tear down the one thing that makes me feel safe in it?" "Something like that, yes," Carol said, her smile never faltering. She was enjoying this, feeding on his anger and his wife's fear. Sarah understands the practicalities of the situation, the financial realities. She sees that this isn't about your feelings. It's about a significant financial investment that you are single-handedly trying to destroy. Get out! Alex took a step forward, his hands clenched. He saw Sarah flinch at his tone, and the sight was like a punch to the gut. He was losing her. This woman, this neighborhood tyrant in her pastel polo, was sitting in his house and methodically dismantling his family. Carol stood up, smoothing the front of her shirt. She was not intimidated. She was invigorated. "Very well. I'll leave you two to discuss it. The offer is on the table for 24 hours. She directed her next words to Sarah, her voice dripping with feigned sympathy. "You know where to find me, dear, when you've managed to talk some sense into him." She walked past Alex and out the front door, leaving a trail of cloying floral perfume and emotional wreckage in her wake. The moment the door clicked shut, the silence she left behind was deafening. "How could you?" Alex finally whispered, the rage draining out of him, replaced by a deep, hollow hurt. "How could you let her in, Sarah? Sit with her? Have tea with her? She showed up at the door!" Sarah shot back, finally looking at him, her eyes flashing with a desperate, defensive anger. "She said she had a way to fix this. A way to get rid of the fines, to stop the lawsuit. Was I supposed to slam the door in her face? I was trying to save us, Alex." "By surrendering?" What was her generous offer? Sarah's shoulders slumped in defeat. "If you sign a full confession, admitting you willfully violated the covenants, and write a formal apology to be published in the HOA newsletter, and if you demolish the shelter in the next 72 hours, they'll agree to waive the fines that have already accrued." Alex stared at her, dumbfounded. It was worse than he could have imagined. It wasn't just demolition, it was ritual humiliation. "They want me to grovel," he said flatly. "They want me to get on my knees and thank them for the privilege of destroying my own property at my own expense. They want it to be over," Sarah countered, her voice rising again. "And so do I. I can't live like this, Alex. Walking on eggshells, waiting for another threatening letter, watching our savings evaporate $200 at a time. I hate this. I hate that shed, and I hate what it's doing to us." She dissolved into tears, burying her face in her hands. The fight was gone, leaving only exhaustion and despair. Alex stood frozen in the center of the room. He had never felt so utterly alone. He went to his wife, hesitated, and then wrapped his arms around her. She didn't pull away, but she didn't lean into him either. They were two separate people, trapped in the same nightmare. That night, sleep was impossible. Sarah lay in their bed, a rigid, silent presence on the far side of the mattress. Alex went downstairs. The house was dark, the only light coming from the faint glow of a street lamp outside. He sat at the dining room table, the thick three-ring binder of the Maple Creek Estate's covenants, conditions, and restrictions in front of him. He had skimmed it when they bought the house, like everyone did, signing his name on a dozen pages without truly understanding the power he was ceding. Now he read. He read every word. He read about lawn maintenance, trash can placement, and the 7 approved shades of taupe for window shutters. He read about the ARC's sweeping, almost unlimited power and the board's authority to levy fines and file lawsuits. It was a masterpiece of suburban tyranny, designed to enforce conformity at all costs. For hours, he found nothing but clauses that confirmed his hopeless situation. Just as the first hints of dawn began to gray the sky, he moved on from the CC&Rs to the publicly available board meeting minutes from the last 5 years. He didn't know what he was looking for. A procedural error, maybe. A chink in the armor. He scanned records of budget approvals, vendor contracts, and minor disputes over holiday decorations. It was mind-numbing, and then he saw it. It was in the minutes from a meeting 3 years ago. Under new business, an entry, discussion of property improvement at 112 Magnolia Lane, Carol Donaldson's address. The next line read, "Item tabled for future review." He stopped, his heart starting to beat faster. Tabled for future review. That wasn't an approval. He frantically searched the minutes for every subsequent meeting. The item never appeared again. There was no motion, no vote, no approval, nothing. What was the improvement? He scrolled back to the ARC submission logs for that month. There wasn't one from 112 Magnolia Lane. Whatever she had done, she hadn't even filed the initial paperwork. Adrenaline surged through him, clearing the fog of exhaustion. He grabbed his phone and pulled up the county property tax website, finding the satellite view of Carol's house. He compared the current overhead photo to one from 4 years ago in the site's archives. The difference was clear. A sprawling flagstone patio and an elaborate outdoor kitchen, complete with a permanent built-in gas grill and a stone fireplace. It was easily over the square footage limit for hardscaping and almost certainly required ARC approval for the structural and utility additions. She hadn't tabled the discussion. She had buried it. He had her. He knew he couldn't just accuse her. He needed proof, and he needed an ally. There was only one person to go to. At 6 a.m., just as the sun was rising, Alex was on George Henderson's doorstep, clutching a folder of printed documents. The old man answered in his bathrobe, looking alarmed. "Alex? What's wrong?" "George, I need your help," Alex said, spreading the satellite photos and meeting minutes on the small porch table. "You've lived here a long time. Do you remember when Carol Donaldson built her new back patio? The big one with the fireplace?" George peered at the photos, his brow furrowed. "Oh, I remember that all right." Caused a bit of a stir. The construction noise went on for a month. Her husband, Richard, was still on the board then. President, actually. Was it ever approved by the board, George? Officially? George looked at the meeting minutes Alex had highlighted. A slow, knowing smile spread across his face. "Well, I'll be damned," he breathed. Richard said he'd handle the paperwork. Claimed it was a minor landscape upgrade. They pushed it right through while everyone was distracted with the new pool regulations. She never got approval. Not for that. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. The hypocrisy was so blatant, so arrogant, it was breathtaking. Alex went home, his mind clear and his purpose renewed. He was done being the victim. He was done pleading. He was going to take the fight to her, using the very weapon she had wielded against him, the rules. He sat down at his computer, Sarah still asleep upstairs. He opened his email, composed a new message, and attached 2 files. A high-resolution satellite photo of Carol's property with the unapproved patio clearly circled in red, and a PDF of the meeting minutes showing the item had been buried. He addressed it not to the board but to the master distribution list for the entire Maple Creek Estates community. He typed the subject line, his fingers steady. An open letter regarding Section 8, Article C, landscaping and hardscaping, and the equitable application of covenants. He wrote a brief, polite, and devastatingly factual message. He outlined the HOA's legal action against his family storm safety shelter, and then stated that in the interest of fairness and the uniform application of the rules that bind them all, he wanted to bring another, more significant violation to the community's attention. He ended the email with a single, unassailable sentence. I trust the Architectural Review Committee will be sending a formal notice of covenant violation to the homeowner at 112 Magnolia Lane with the same expediency they have shown in my case, and I look forward to seeing the detailed plan for the structure's immediate removal. His cursor hovered over the send button. This was it. There was no coming back from this. He wasn't just breaking the rules anymore. He was setting fire to the entire rulebook. He clicked send. The digital explosion was instantaneous. Alex hit send at 6:15 a.m. By 6:20, the first reply all hit the server and the floodgates opened. For the residents of Maple Creek Estates, who typically only use the community listserv to announce garage sales or complain about dog droppings, it was the social equivalent of a nuclear detonation. A montage of outrage and intrigue filled Alex's inbox. From a Carol loyalist, "This is a disgusting and personal attack. The Kellers should be sanctioned for using the community listserv to harass a board member." From a newly emboldened resident, "Personal attack? He attached the county records. Looks pretty factual to me. Maybe we should be talking about this. Apply the rules to everyone." From the neighborhood pot stirrer, "OMG, Carol, call me. Is this why you voted against my flamingo mailbox?" From David Chen, the HOA treasurer, "All members, please refrain from using the reply all function. This matter will be addressed by the board through official channels only." The text from Sarah came at 6:32 a.m. She wasn't yelling. It was worse. It was a single cold sentence. "I'm taking Lily to my sister's house for the day. I can't be here for this." Before he could even process the sting of her message, his phone rang. It was George Henderson, his voice a giddy conspiratorial whisper. "Alex, my boy, you've done it now." My phone hasn't stopped buzzing. It's all anyone is talking about. People I haven't heard from in years are suddenly asking questions. They're scared of her, but they're starting to see you're not the bad guy here. You've given them cover. The validation felt good, but it was fleeting. Because at 7:01 a.m. his phone rang again. The caller ID was a blocked number, but he knew exactly who it was. He took a breath, hit the record button on his phone's screen, and answered. "Hello." "You pathetic, spineless little worm," Carol's voice hissed, stripped of all its syrupy civility. It was the raw, unrestrained sound of a queen whose castle had just been stormed by a peasant. "You think you're clever? You think sending a nasty little email is going to save that metal garbage heap in your yard? You just signed your own death warrant." "Is this an official communication on behalf of the HOA, Carol?" Alex asked, his own voice surprisingly steady. The fear was gone, replaced by a cold, hard clarity. "Because if it is, I'd like to get your threats on the record." There was a choked sound on the other end, a gasp of pure fury. "This has nothing to do with the HOA, she spat. "This is about me. You have publicly defamed me. You have attacked my family. I am going to make it my personal sworn mission to see you and your sad little family thrown out of this neighborhood. I will bury you in legal fees until you are begging for mercy. I will sue you until you have nothing left but that ugly box. Do you understand me? What I understand is that you built a massive, unapproved structure on your property in direct violation of the same covenants you are using to threaten my family," Alex stated, his tone as flat and factual as an auditor's report. "All I did was ask for the rules to be applied fairly." "Are you on the record stating that you are above the rules?" The line went dead. He knew the conversation wasn't over. He had just confirmed her greatest fear. He wasn't intimidated anymore. And for a person like Carol, whose power was built entirely on intimidation, that made him the most dangerous man in Maple Creek. Meanwhile, in a hastily arranged conference call, the other 4 members of the HOA board were in full-blown panic mode, a clear case of selective enforcement. David Chen, the treasurer, argued, his voice tight with anxiety. David was an accountant, a man who lived and died by ledgers and liability. If we proceed with the lawsuit against Keller while ignoring the documented violation on Carol's property, he'll countersue, and he will win. The association will be on the hook for his legal fees and potential damages. We cannot expose ourselves like that. So we just let him win? Another board member whined. We let him keep that eyesore and make us all look like fools? Carol needs to file a retroactive ARC request for the patio, David said, trying to be the voice of reason. We vote to approve it, and then we can argue her violation has been cured. Then we continue with the action against Keller. She'll never agree to that. The first member shot back. That's an admission of guilt. She'll have to pay the fines. The board was fractured. Carol's iron-fisted rule had worked when the enemy was outside the gates. Now, Alex had turned her into a liability, forcing the board members to choose between loyalty to her and the legal and financial security of the association itself. They were trapped. Throughout the day, the human drama played out against a backdrop of an increasingly strange and ominous sky. The morning's bright sun had given way to a hazy, yellowish pallor. The air grew thick, hot, and unnervingly still, so humid that a walk to the mailbox left a sheen of sweat on the skin. On the 24-hour news channel, a meteorologist pointed at a swirling mass of green and red on the weather map. We're watching a particularly volatile system moving in from the west, she said, her tone professionally cheerful, but her eyes betraying a hint of concern. Conditions are becoming very favorable for severe weather later this evening. We'll be keeping a close eye on it. Alex watched the report, a familiar knot tightening in his stomach. He tried calling Sarah, but she didn't pick up. He was an island, surrounded by a hostile sea, with a storm of his own raging around him and a far more dangerous one gathering on the horizon. Late in the afternoon, 2 emails arrived almost simultaneously. The first was from the HOA. It was the statement David Chen had painstakingly crafted with the board's lawyer. It was a masterpiece of bureaucratic doublespeak. Subject: Board response to recent community correspondence. The Board of Directors acknowledges that concerns have been raised by a homeowner regarding covenant enforcement. We wish to assure the community that all potential covenant violations are taken seriously. The Board and its legal counsel are reviewing the matters in question in accordance with the established procedures outlined in our governing documents. We thank you for your patience as we work to ensure a fair and equitable resolution for all parties. It was a stall. A weak, transparent attempt to kick the can down the road and hope everyone lost interest. Alex almost laughed. Then he opened the second email. This one was not a community-wide message. It was a PDF sent directly to him from an address he didn't recognize. The sending firm was Blackwood, Kane, and Spector LLP, a massive, notoriously aggressive litigation firm based in the city. The kind of firm you hire when you don't just want to win. You want to scorch the earth your opponent stands on. The document was a formal notice of intent to pursue legal action. It had nothing to do with the HOA or the shed. It was from Carol Donaldson. Personally, she was suing him for defamation of character, slander, and tortious interference with her duties as an HOA official. The letter claimed his malicious and baseless email had caused her irreparable harm, emotional distress, and damaged her standing in the community. It named him as the sole defendant and listed a preliminary damages claim of $500,000. Alex's blood ran cold. This was a monster he couldn't fight. The HOA lawsuit was a skirmish. This was a declaration of total war. She had bypassed the now divided board and was using her own considerable wealth to crush him directly. The letter was a clear message. You can't beat me. I will ruin you. He stared at the screen, the $500,000 figure swimming before his eyes. He felt the walls of his carefully constructed world begin to crumble. He had won the battle of public opinion, only to find himself facing an executioner. Just then, his phone, forgotten on the counter, emitted a series of loud, piercing beeps. The sound was alien, an electronic shriek that cut through the oppressive silence of the house. He looked down at the screen. A bright red banner flashed across it, overriding everything else. It was a push notification from the National Weather Service. Tornado watch issued for Oakwood County. Until 10 p.m. Conditions are favorable for the development of severe thunderstorms and tornadoes. This is a dangerous situation. The two alerts, one digital and one atmospheric, hung in the silent house, demanding equal attention. For a moment, Alex's mind couldn't process them. The $500,000 lawsuit was a tangible monster, a beast of paper and lawyers that could methodically chew up his life over the next several years. The tornado watch was an abstraction, a familiar ghost that haunted the skies every spring and summer, more often than not fading away without incident. But then he looked out the window. The light was wrong. A sickly, jaundiced yellow had seeped into the afternoon, casting the perfect green lawns in an apocalyptic glow. The air was unnaturally still, holding its breath. He knew that stillness. He knew that light. The ghost was real today. His first thought was a spike of pure, cold terror, not for himself but for his family. Sarah and Lily were at her sister's house, 15 miles west. Directly in the path of the approaching system, he snatched his phone and dialed her number. It rang once, twice, a third time. He pictured her ignoring his call, still angry, and a fresh wave of panic washed over him. What? Her voice was clipped, weary. Sarah, you have to come home. Now, he said, skipping any preamble. You and Lily, get in the car and come home right now. Alex, if this is about the email, I don't want to talk about it, she started. No, it's not about the email. There's a tornado watch for the whole county. The storm system is west of you. You need to drive east, back to the house. He heard her sigh on the other end. It was the sigh of a person who had spent years dealing with someone else's trauma. A watch, Alex. It's not a warning. You know how many of these we get? You can't panic every time the sky gets a little dark. It's different this time, he insisted, his voice tight with an urgency she couldn't see. He had to make her understand. He played his last desperate card. And that's not all. Carol is suing me, personally. She hired a big firm from the city. She's suing me for $500,000. The line went silent. He could hear her processing the sheer vindictive insanity of it. The lawsuit, combined with the undeniable menace in his voice, finally broke through her anger. I'm looking outside, she said, her voice suddenly small. You're right. The sky is green. We're leaving now. While he waited, the world outside began to change. The stillness broke, replaced by sudden violent gusts of wind that bent the meticulously chosen ornamental pear trees in his neighbors' yards nearly in half. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, smacking against the windows like thrown pebbles. A low, continuous rumble started in the distance, a bass note so deep he felt it in his bones more than he heard it with his ears. All the birds had vanished. He watched his neighbors. A few like him were anxiously scanning the skies. Most, however, went about their business with a practiced nonchalance. They rolled their grills into their garages, tucked patio cushions away, and treated the coming storm as an inconvenience, a brief interruption to their perfectly scheduled lives. Through her large front window, he could see Carol Donaldson pacing back and forth in her foyer, phone pressed to her ear. She wasn't looking at the sky. She was consumed by her own storm, her face a mask of furious indignation as she likely plotted his complete annihilation with her new, expensive lawyer. The irony was so thick it was nauseating. The whole neighborhood was obsessed with his eyesore, the one thing built to defy the sky, while the sky itself was preparing to wipe their pristine, beige world off the map. 20 minutes later, Sarah's SUV screeched into the driveway. She and Lily ran for the house, heads bowed against the wind, which was now whipping with a frightening intensity. The moment they were inside, Alex locked the door behind them. The fight was gone from Sarah's face, replaced by the same primal fear she saw mirrored in his own. The lawsuit, the emails, the anger, it had all been rendered meaningless by the ominous green sky. Okay, Alex said, taking command. The years of anxiety, of running through this exact scenario in his mind, had prepared him. We're stocking the shelter. Sarah, you get the water jugs from the pantry and the first aid kit. Lily, honey, I need you to go get your teddy bear, Hubble. He needs to be safe with us. His daughter, sensing the gravity in his tone, nodded silently and ran to her room. For the next 10 minutes, they were a team, united by a singular purpose. They moved with a quiet, desperate efficiency, carrying jugs of water, blankets, a battery-powered radio, flashlights, and a box of granola bars out to the shelter. Alex's hands were steady, his mind clear. For the first time, Sarah looked at the ugly gray box, not with resentment, but with a dawning sense of hope. The thing she had seen as the manifestation of his paranoia was now their only sanctuary. They were making their last trip, Alex carrying a weather radio and Sarah holding Lily's hand, when the power inside the house flickered and died. The world was plunged into a murky, greenish twilight. At the same instant, a sound began to rise from all across town. It was the sound from his deepest nightmares. The sound of the civil defense sirens, a mournful, undulating wail that signaled the imminent arrival of death from above. As if on cue, the TV inside, now running on its battery backup, blared the harsh, grating tone of the emergency alert system. The meteorologist's face was grim. "We interrupt this broadcast for a tornado warning. A large, extremely dangerous tornado was confirmed on the ground near Westwood and is moving northeast at 40 miles per hour. This is a tornado emergency for Maple Creek. This is not a drill. Take shelter immediately. Go! Go now!" Alex yelled over the rising scream of the sirens and the roar of the wind. He half-pushed Sarah and Lily into the shelter's narrow opening and down the few concrete steps into the cool, earthy darkness. Rain was lashing down, driven horizontally by the wind. A lawn chair from a neighbor's yard cartwheeled through the air and smashed into a fence. The world was coming apart. Alex stood at the threshold, preparing to swing the heavy bank vault-style steel door shut. He cast one last sweeping glance across the neighborhood. He saw chaos, panicked figures scrambling for their homes, George Henderson fumbling with the cellar door on the side of his house. The lights in Carol's house were out. He could just make out her silhouette in the large picture window, a statue of disbelief. The roar was building now, a low rumble escalating into the deafening, grinding cacophony of a freight train that was no longer in the distance but right on top of them. He had to close the door, now. He put his shoulder into the thick steel, ready to seal them in. But then a movement caught his eye. A single figure bursting out of a front door 2 houses down. It was Carol. Her perfect hair was a frantic mess, plastered to her face by the rain. Her pastel polo was soaked. The mask of arrogant superiority had been ripped away, replaced by the raw, primal terror of an animal caught in a trap. She was running, stumbling through the manicured lawns, her knees buckling in the saturated grass. She fell, scrambled back up, and kept running. She was screaming, but the sound was swallowed by the apocalyptic roar of the approaching tornado. She wasn't running for her own basement. She wasn't running for cover. She was running directly towards him, towards his shed, towards the hideous metal bunker she had threatened to tear from the face of the earth. Alex stood frozen, his hand on the door of his family's salvation. Inside, Sarah was yelling his name. "Alex, close the door!"
"Close it!"
Outside, the woman who had tried to ruin him, who had threatened his home and his family, who had just slapped him with a $500,000 lawsuit, was fighting for her life. The monster in the sky was seconds away. He had time to save his family or to wait for her. Not both. His eyes met hers across the wind-lashed expanse of lawn. He saw no anger, no pride, just pure, unadulterated terror. The roar became everything. The world was ending. He had to make a choice.